Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, I'm going to react to a Texas governor who refused to give up control of the border to federal officers. Now this, when I saw this come up on YouTube, I thought this is kind of crazy because, surely the federal government, has the final say on things, don't they? Even though I know that America's basically like 50 separate countries, I guess, within one larger state, still I would have thought that, if the federal government says, jump, that the state government basically has to say how high, or is that not really how it goes? I've heard a lot about the immigration issues that are happening in the States. It's happening all over the world, well, not all over the world, but it's happening in a lot in the Western world. And to a degree, I can understand it. A lot of people really, really want a better life for themselves. And this is a direct result of, I have to say, I'm not saying all of the immigration is a result of Western interference in domestic affairs, but I'd have to say a good amount of it is, if you go into another country and you disrupt or, take out the leadership, basically, don't leave it better than you found it, there's going to be blowback. There is. And a lot of it is down to that. But a lot of it is down to, people just wanting, to better themselves, their lives, their families' lives. So on one hand, I have empathy for those people. But on the other hand, a country, it can only house a certain amount of people, infrastructure is only built to deal with a certain amount of use. Like schools can only take X amount of students, hospitals can only treat certain amount of people, etc. So there are limits, But also on the flip side, the way our economy is structured, our capitalist society, it depends on growth. It depends on infinite growth. People continuing to spend more money, buy products, buy services, etc. And one of the best ways to stimulate growth is just by adding more people. That's the fact of the matter. So it's going to be interesting to see how, what actually went down here.
Texas Governor Greg Abbott refusing to give up control of the Texas border to federal officials, ignoring the administration's deadline to get access to Shelby Park by keeping federal agents out. That deadline is today. Instead, Abbott is installing more razor wire following the Supreme Court's decision, allowing federal agents to remove it. Texas now receiving support from 25 Republican governors, all backing Abbott's border actions while blaming the Biden administration for the crisis. Former President Trump wants to take it one step further, encouraging the states to deploy their National Guardsmen to Texas to prevent illegal crossings. I want to bring in New York Congresswoman Claudia Tenney. Congresswoman, your reaction to these 25 states, this is half the country, and we should say that Governor Kristi Noem already says, absolutely, I will send our National Guard members down to the border if I'm asked.
Yeah, well, this is a catastrophe at the border. As you know, I just want to weigh in from New York. We have a far left liberal governor who just put $2.4 billion more into protecting illegal immigrants in the state of New York. And I just had a roundtable conference with all different types of law enforcement members, including Customs and Border Patrol, because I represent the northern border of New York. And they described to me a situation where so many of them have been displaced to the southern border because of the catastrophe there. And so we are leaving ourselves vulnerable everywhere. And the fact that the Supreme Court is coming down against Texas on this case, we'll see where it ultimately ends up. But Texas is trying to defend its border against a lawless president, a Department of Homeland Security head, Mayorkas.
Wow, oh my God, are these all migrants? There's a lot of them.
Using to actually implement the laws of the United States, which is what part of the basis for the impeachment of both Joe Biden and...
I'm trying to think, maybe one strategy is to invest in the places where these people are from to make it attractive to them to stay. Like if you were to create a fund, I don't know, I'm just thinking of an arbitrary number. Let's say $5 billion annually, or let's say $10 billion annually, and you invest it in the countries where most of the illegal migrants are coming from. You invest it in infrastructure, I don't know, jobs, whatever. Make it attractive, because then you're dealing with the source problem. Like if you build, if you put more razor wire, they're just going to find a way to get around that. I think you got to go for the source of the issue.
Is about in the House of Representatives, where we have a very slim majority now, only 2-seat majority, really between keeping sanity and the craziness of what's happening in the Biden administration. And I think it was pointed out recently by our speaker that 64 different laws, whether they're
this razor
executive
wire,
orders
even if you
or
build it 10 foot high,
of our administrative
it's not
laws
going
by
to stop them coming.
is what has caused this problem at the border. We had laws in place under President Trump that were working, and yet this president decided to roll them back simply because they were rules, it seems to me, by Donald Trump. And it is now becoming, isn't this?
But that's what all presidents do. They usually, if they're especially from their opposite parties, they always, get rid of the previous administration's rules. It happens all
over
the time.
Again, as Yogi Berra would say. We are looking at the biggest issue that was faced in 2016 when President Trump was seeking election. Now it was the border then, and now it's the border and the economy again.
I am so glad, Claudia, that you brought up the issue of Congresswoman, pardon me. I am so glad that you brought up the issue of Governor Hochul and that fund, and the funding, because here in New York City, Adams, the mayor of the city, coming out saying another $177 million towards keeping these migrants in New York City hotel rooms. So here, instead of having tourists come in and rent out hotels rooms in this city, we've got migrants that are and why wouldn't they want to come to a place like New York? And they are. You're getting a hotel. You're getting a phone. The red carpet is getting rolled out. And until this city stops being a sanctuary city, which I don't think is going to happen because of Albany, and also when this right to shelter disaster is overturned, which again, I'm not hopeful it's going to happen, the budget of the city of New York, and because you're a New York congressman, I want to ask you this: is there any
hope? Are these massive buildings here? These kind of facilities where they're holding these people? It's such a complicated issue, man. It's happening here in England. It's happening everywhere. It's happening all over the West. I just don't know how you solve this. I think for one thing, we need to stop. The West needs to stop interfering in other countries' affairs. It's looking like we're escalating this Iran conflict now. If we go over there now and start a full-blown war with Iran, which obviously, because, America combined with England and France and Germany, we have more military assets, right? If we destroy, huge portions of Iran, displacing, millions of civilians, where do you think these civilians are going to try and get to? We need to stop waging these wars. If avoidable, we need to stop doing that.
That this city and New York State can come out of this mess.
Look at Cheryl, this $2.4 billion that I cited that Governor Hochul put in this year's budget is on top of $1 billion in new taxes for illegal immigrants in the state. And they're continuing to try to force them upstate. Look, Mayor Adams knows he has a problem on his hands. He's pleaded to Joe Biden and others, but they continue to blame the Republicans. That's exactly what Joe Biden keeps doing. When this crisis is squarely in his court, he has created it. He's made it worse. The numbers are staggering. And Cheryl, when I start hearing Democrats talking about mass deportation and talking about the problems at the border, this is going to be a bellwether for this election, because people are realizing how much this takes away from their own resources in a state like New York. And remember, another thing that we have in New York State, it's called the Green Light Law. This was brought up to me by every member of law enforcement, from Customs and Border Patrol all the way to local sheriffs. This law, passed by Governor Cuomo in 2019, allows illegal immigrants to get driver's licenses and prevents any kind of sharing of Department of Motor Vehicle records. So if a police officer or a Customs and Border agent encounters someone who may be an illegal immigrant, maybe a stolen car, a stolen boat on all the different waterways that I have in my district, they cannot share any of that information.
Another thing you've got to be aware of is that illegal immigration benefits the wealthy hugely. You have to believe that there's people at the top who want this to happen, because they've got more supply of cheap labor, right? They've got more people that are going to buy their products. So if you think it's strictly a political issue, honestly, I do think just you got to zoom out a little bit. Like, who benefits from more people being in a country that are willing to work for low wages? They're going to still pay taxes. They're going to buy food, because who doesn't need food? They're going to pay rents. Like, come on.
Motor vehicles with them to determine if this is in fact an ongoing crime, a stolen vehicle or whatever, and they cannot determine because illegal immigrants with valid New York licenses are protected, which conceivably, Cheryl, they could go anywhere in the United States holding up a valid New York license.
Yep.
These are privileges of citizenship, not illegal immigrants.
And you know who's the most angry about this is those here and I'm just going to go stay on New York for a second. The most angry are those that did it legally, that they fought their way through the immigration court system to actually be a U.S. citizen. They're the most furious. But you know what? I always say this, New York, you get what you vote for. James Freeman from the Wall Street Journal is on set with me. Congresswoman, he's got a question for you.
Thanks, Congresswoman. Sure. Yeah, trying to figure out, you mentioned how the president doesn't want to solve this problem, and I'm trying to figure out why. Yeah, we show that graphic with the 25 Republican governors opposing him. If it was a secret ballot, you might get 50. He can't possibly at this point fear an AOC-type candidate showing up on his left in Democratic primaries. Why is this not in his interest to solve this problem? I just don't get it.
You know, that is the $64,000, maybe in this era, it's the $64 billion question. They're putting us at risk as our economy. Number one, you're taking resources away from everyday Americans. We are spending billions of dollars for people who did not earn those living. You know, there is something that Donald Trump did run on in 2016. Whether you like him or not, he captivated people by something that's really critical to our country, and it's the value of citizenship. It matters. And as Cheryl just pointed out, new immigrants value it even more than we do. And I think people have become complacent. And I think the Democrats have a lust for authoritarianism. They are so close to total control of our federal government. They're 2 seats away. And authoritarianism, which they always project, by the way, oh, Trump's an authoritarian, or the Republicans are authoritarians, or the MAGA Republicans are lawless. Everything they project that they claim that the Republicans are doing, they're doing themselves and are worse. You know, we have a president under President Trump. I guess it's to register more voters under the green light law, by the way.
Are you seeing any change?
Man, it's crazy. So there's an election going to happen. There's an election that's going to happen in the States. There's an election going to happen here. It's politically, it's going to be a huge year. It's and whenever it's an election year, you know, it's the rhetoric that comes out in the media, it always just reaches next level. Like, yeah, it's going to be interesting to say the least. It's going to be interesting.
I hate to be so cynical to say that. I founded the Election Integrity Caucus, and I know but in New York, they have changed the rules to really just take advantage of our voting system. You know, we have no integrity left in New York's law, and actually we had a decent law originally before the Democrats started really imposing new laws.
James, go ahead.
Okay, so you're not hearing, I guess, from Democratic colleagues in the House, from White House, the president and his staff. You're not hearing any new willingness to negotiate, to look at ways of fixing this lately. I mean, we keep reading. News consumers keep reading all these stories about negotiations in the Senate. Do you see a change in approach from the White House?
Well, I think there is a problem. We have an octogenarian in the White House who makes statements he shouldn't make, and I think he's blurted out statements that have become public, like, oh, we have a crisis at the border. He's admitting it while staff tries to roll it back and deconflict what he said. So I do think, and I hate to be cynically me, says Mr. Freeman, I think there is an element of let's get these people in, let's make them voters, let's make sure that we win them over. And I think that is, I mean, it's hard not to believe that's part of what they're doing. But I think it's all part of a mass destruction of our country and our framework. And I think that's part of it as well.
Congresswoman Claudia Tenney, between you,
Nicole. Very interesting. Yeah, it's a big issue. It really is. It's a big issue. Not just in the States, not just here, but pretty much any country that, you know, is seen as desirable, they're having massive issues with this. And, you know, like I said in the video, I think you need to try and deal with the root problem. Like, the root problem is the places that they're coming from aren't seen by their citizens as desirable anymore. Why is that? Is it because of the leadership in those countries? Is it because of Western interventions in those countries? It's whatever the reason, it's in our interest. If we don't want, you know, huge amounts of them, and I mean, when I say huge, I mean like unsustainable amounts of them coming to where you live and putting a strain on resources, it's in your interest, it's in our interest to make those countries as desirable as possible. It really is. So I know that maybe some of you, when I suggest that if we create a fund like where, you know, all developed nations put into the fund and we invest it in those nations to make it more desirable for them, I think that's probably the right play, honestly, genuinely, because you can put whatever barrier you want. If someone is desperate enough, they will find a way around it. It's just human nature. It's human nature. They're not going to stop coming. They're not. So I think, A, invest in those countries in whatever means we can, and B, stop interfering militarily unless you absolutely need to. Like, when I say absolutely, I mean like they are literally, you know, they've attacked us, something like that. Then it's justified, in my opinion. But yeah, like, you know, what's happening in Iran right now, the general mood, I've tried not to follow it too closely, but I can't help it. It's escalating. It is escalating. And, you know, it's trending towards a greater conflict in the region. And there's always going to be collateral damage, you know, and these people are going to need somewhere to go. So it's like, let's not make the same mistakes we did, you know, in 2003. Let's not do that again. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.